Version of a Gantt chart and how to do that within Excel. There's a lot of schools of thoughts regarding the applicable stages for a project. For our purposes, for this demonstration, we're going to go with what my organization typically uses: initiation, planning, execution, monitor, control, and close. There's probably some similar functionality, whatever organization you're at, and your best bet as far as what stages to call things is just to go with the flow and use what your organization has. In the event they don't have any, you can certainly take these. So for this demonstration, initiation, this is when the project is kicked off. For most projects, this begins with some sort of a charter documentation, and you do your initial planning as far as who's part of the project. PMI has some very specific considerations when it comes to the project charter, but essentially this stage is when you get approval for funding and you kick off the project. So that's going to be our initiation stage. Then we'll move to the planning stage. That's when tools like this are developed. It's where you plan how long the work's going to take out, how you're going to communicate with stakeholders. To that point, who are the stakeholders? Some of your risk planning, assessments, etc. You're planning the project. Move on then to execution, and that's when you actually do the work. For the IT projects that I manage, this is going to be coding, configuration, etc. If you're in construction, this is when your walls are going up and your concrete is poured. This is the heart of the work itself. Your next stage is monitor and controlling. Generally, this is going to be your user testing, rolling it into implementation, and your project closure is sign off and formal acceptance and your notification of the stakeholders. So the Gantt chart setup, I'm only doing, like I said, very simplified, just so that you understand how the functionality works for Excel. A lot of people are going to use MS Project, but I'm focused more now on what it kind of looks like as opposed to the actual functionality that you may use, because each organization is going to be very different, so it would be tough to try to match up for everyone. For our purposes here, we're going to start with these stages in this Excel document. I went ahead and selected some kind of arbitrary dates and durations so that we can get something up here. My project is going to be very short. It looks like about just a month long or so, a little bit less, 3 weeks or so. I'm going to do it in a stacked bar chart. So you'll insert a 2D stacked bar chart, bring that over near your dates, and let's select the data. So the first data you're going to select is your start dates. That'll be your Y values. Just select those dates, note them in. Your next series of values will be the duration or the day count. And we'll go ahead and call that days. As you can see, it kind of starts to look like what you might be familiar with the Gantt chart. A lot of formatting issues, though, for anyone to use this in that aspect. So we'll go ahead and get that formatted so it looks a little better. Start by making this a little larger for user-friendly. These numbers are not right. Let's get our proper labels on here. We're going to select the data for that. For our x-axis labels, and those will be our stages. Okay, now we've got our right stages. You'll notice they're kind of in inverse order here. So let's go ahead and get the inverse order. For that, you'll right click and you'll format your axis and go to the scale section, categories in reverse order. Alright, now we're getting a little better. Because we're using such small numeric values, we're going to go ahead and get the scale so that it shows every day. Because in a project that's only a couple months long, a couple weeks long, you're going to want to see it on a daily basis. So let's format that axis, and for this it's going to be your scale, and our major unit is where you get your section for the amount of days, and we want to show all of them. So that's a little smushed. Let's go ahead and spread that out. That's not too bad. We're going to gain some ground here in a second by changing our start. If you'll notice, we're starting here with a little bit of excess value. To figure out your start date, if you go to your initial date and go to Format Cells, we're going to go up to General, and you'll notice a funky number here, 42,177. That's the number you're going to want to remember to change things to as your default start. I'm sorry, as your manually entered start instead of the default start. So if you go back to your format access in that number section, the minimum should be that 42,177, and that you'll bring your start back to the original line. So now we're starting where we should. These blue lines we don't really like. Usually in a Gantt chart you don't show time that's passed in the area that you're not working in. So let's go ahead and change that for change series chart type. I'm sorry, we're going to go ahead and change the data labels. Nope. Data series, sorry. Delete our fill. So our fill is going to be no fill. Our line is going to be no line. And Apple likes shadows, so it always defaults to 1. And we're going to have a white shadow, so it doesn't show it. And that should get us there. We can take these dates out. I don't like those dates there. So now we're getting pretty close to finished. I like to have this kind of max area, but if you wanted to take that off, you could do the same inverse thing here where you get a final date noted by looking at the formatting cells and your general 42,201. So we can change our access here at the top. I'm going to go with O2 so we have just a tiny bit of gap afterwards and it doesn't cut off my last line. So there you have it, a pretty simple Gantt chart that takes out the steps for the normal project steps. Most Gantt charts are going to be a lot more specific. Your initiation phase is going to have sublines like project charter sign off, your team selection, and then your planning is going to have kind of a rolling wave sort of functionality, so there may be some overlap into execution. Your execution is of course going to have some key milestones of what deliverables are due when, and monitor and controlling the same sort of thing with sign off and implementation. And then of course close is going to have the final delivery. So that is your basic Gantt chart using an Apple version of Microsoft Excel 2013. Thank you very much for your time.